All right, so moving on from Dewey's defense of his hypothesis about the origin of logic, he's going to, in the next couple of pages that we're going to look at here, he's going to consider terms like belief and knowledge and then introduce us to his more preferred term of warranted assertability. So he writes, I now return to exposition of the meaning of the position taken. That inquiry is related to doubt will, I suppose, be admitted. The admission carries with it an implication regarding the end of inquiry. End in both senses of the word, as end in view and as close or termination. Right, so inquiry, one of his big themes of the book is inquiry in relation to doubt, and inquiry as a method for basically the way by which we remove doubt, and end. So the term end is going to be important, means and ends, right? And end, he gives two senses of the word. He's often going to say in both senses of the word as the kind of the goal, the end in view, the thing you're trying to achieve, and end as the close or termination of inquiry. So these two senses of end are often going to come into play here. He says, if inquiry begins in doubt, it terminates in the institution of conditions which remove the need for doubt. So the termination of inquiry is about removing doubt. The latter state of affairs, when doubt is removed, the latter state of affairs may be designated by the words belief and knowledge. For reasons that I shall state later, I prefer the words warranted assertability. Belief, I'm going to talk a little bit about belief first. So belief may be so understood as to be a fitting designation for the outcome of inquiry. Doubt is uneasy. It is tension that finds expression and outlet in the processes of inquiry. Inquiry terminates in reaching that which is settled. So the removal of doubt, right? The institution of conditions of certainty. This settled condition is a demarcating characteristic of genuine belief. Insofar, belief is an appropriate name for the end of inquiry. So when we are not in doubt, we believe, right? We believe something to be the case. When we no longer have doubt about what is the case. So in this way, belief is an appropriate name for the end of inquiry, but belief is a double-barreled word. And this idea of a double-barreled word, I believe, comes originally from William James. These are words that are kind of have both a subjective and an objective side to them. Experience is the one other famous example of that. So experience is the thing that you have the experience of, and it's also your experience of something. So belief is a double-barreled word. It is used objectively to name what is believed. So we have the belief, right? The belief in the sense of that which is believed. In this sense, the outcome of inquiry is a settled objective state of affairs, so settled that we are ready to act upon it, overtly or in imagination. Belief here names the settled condition of objective subject matter, together with readiness to act in a given way when, if, and as that subject matter is present in existence, right? So belief, when the object of belief is there, the objective conditions are there, the settled conditions of belief are present, then we're ready to act in a certain way. And this is an old pragmatist idea that belief is that on which we are prepared to act. But in popular usage, belief also means a personal matter, something that some human being entertains or holds, a position, which under the influence of psychology is converted into the notion that belief is merely a mental or psychical state. Associations from this signification of the word belief are likely to creep in when it is said that the end of inquiry is settled belief. The objective meaning of subject matter, as that is settled through inquiry, is then dimmed or even shut out. The ambiguity of the word thus renders it inadvisable, renders its use inadvisable for the purpose at hand. So Peirce, Charles Sanders Peirce, had often used the term belief in this first sense, and I think Dewey is borrowing that, drawing on that idea. But there's also the popular idea of belief, like just what you believe, what you strongly think is true, in a personal sense, and not something that maybe is shareable with other people, which of course is more about science, right? Public belief in a certain state of affairs is more of a matter of science. You can verify it or falsify it. Personal belief is something less amenable to evidence, to scientific inquiry. And so the problem with using the word belief in talking about logic and inquiry, and especially scientific inquiry, is that maybe these two senses of belief can kind of confuse us. So belief, not a word that we're going to use very much in the logic, in Dewey's logic. And then he's going to go on to the term knowledge. So Dewey writes, the word knowledge is also a suitable term to designate the objective and close of inquiry, but it too suffers from ambiguity. When it is said that attainment of knowledge or truth is the end of inquiry, the statement, according to the position here taken, is a truism. That which satisfactorily terminates inquiry is, by definition, knowledge. It is knowledge because it is the appropriate close of inquiry, hence a truism or a tautology, right? Knowledge just is what is attained after the close of inquiry, at the close of inquiry. But the statement may be supposed, and has been supposed, to enunciate something significant instead of a tautology. As a truism, it defines knowledge as the outcome of competent and controlled inquiry. When, however, the statement is thought to enunciate something significant, the case is reversed. Knowledge is then supposed to have a meaning of its own, apart from connection with and reference to inquiry. So, again, there's an ambiguity here. Knowledge just as the name for the outcome of inquiry, and knowledge as something held separate from inquiry. And Dewey writes, the theory of inquiry is then necessarily subordinated to this meaning as a fixed external end. The opposition between the two views is basic. The idea that any knowledge in particular can be instituted apart from its being the consummation of inquiry, and that knowledge in general can be defined apart from this connection is, moreover, one of the sources of confusion in logical theory. So the idea that logic can somehow be separated from inquiry is a big source of confusion. For the different varieties of realism, idealism, and dualism have their diverse conceptions of what knowledge really is. And this was hinted at earlier as well in talking when Dewey, or a similar, maybe a similar idea was brought up earlier when Dewey writes that one's conception of logic is dependent on one's broader metaphysical position of realism, idealism, dualism, monism, or what have you. Even though we tend to think that logic is something separate from all of this. And a similar thing happens with knowledge. We might think that knowledge is separate something separate from one's particular favored metaphysical position. But in fact, all these different positions have different ideas about what actual knowledge is. In consequence, he writes, logical theory is rendered subservient to metaphysical and epistemological preconceptions, so that interpretation of logical forms varies with underlying metaphysical assumptions. Yeah, so it's basically what I just was summarizing. And then Dewey is going to say more about his own position. So the position here taken holds that since every special case of knowledge is constituted as the outcome of some special inquiry, the conception of knowledge as such can only be a generalization of the properties discovered to belong to conclusions which are outcomes of inquiry. So the conception of knowledge as such, so knowledge is an outcome of this or that inquiry. When we get to the end of inquiry and we have a more, have less doubt about things, we have knowledge, and knowledge as a broader idea, knowledge as such, we can only get to this idea from generalizing from these specific cases of having gained knowledge by going through the process of inquiry. So knowledge as an abstract term is a name for the product of competent inquiries. So there's no, we should be careful about reifying or hypostatizing this term knowledge. It's not something that exists separate from inquiry, but when we use the term knowledge just as something general, we're just abstracting from all these actual concrete inquiries that have given us knowledge. So knowledge just, you can use it as an abstract term, but just don't hold that up as something ultimate aside from or apart from inquiry. Apart from this relation, its meaning is so empty that any content or filling may be arbitrarily poured in, which is not what you should do. He's just saying that that's kind of what has been done by various other philosophers, or that's a danger at least. And that's a danger, I think, with many other abstract terms, like belief, as we already mentioned, consciousness, all these very large abstract terms. They're so empty once you separate them from actual processes of inquiry that you can kind of fill them with. The danger is that you kind of arbitrarily fill them in with whatever is convenient or needed for your broader theory to work. So the general conception of knowledge, when formulated in terms of the outcome of inquiry, has something important to say. Regarding the meaning of inquiry itself, for it indicates that inquiry is a continuing process in every field with which it is engaged. The settlement of a particular situation by a particular inquiry is no guarantee that that settled conclusion will always remain settled. Yeah, so this is, of course, a common occurrence in science, that just because an inquiry ends, is settled, knowledge seems to be gained, it doesn't mean that it's, that's the ultimate word on this. The attainment of settled beliefs is a progressive matter. There is no belief so settled as not to be exposed to further inquiry. So everything is up for revision. Everything is amenable to further inquiry. There is no belief, So it is the convergent and cumulative effect of continued inquiry that defines knowledge in its general meaning. So knowledge as what happens through continued inquiry, the cumulative effects of continued inquiry. In scientific inquiry, the criterion of what is taken to be settled or to be knowledge is being so settled that it is available as a resource in further inquiry, not being settled in such a way as not to be subject to revision in further inquiry. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a meaty sentence. Let me just check where I am in, okay. I'm going to go on for one more paragraph after this. Yeah, this last sentence. So in scientific inquiry, so the criterion of what is to be taken is of what is taken to be settled or to be knowledge. So the what we get at the end of inquiry when we feel our doubt about something is lessened or removed. Kind of the purpose of this or what we do about this is then it becomes material for further inquiry. So we use the outcomes of previous inquiry to ground further inquiry, but it doesn't mean that these previous outcomes are now totally and forever settled. It's just a convenience, right? Now we're pretty sure that we know what these things are, so now we can use them in further inquiry. But that doesn't mean that we might not have to revise what we think later, because further inquiry may show us that, well, actually we aren't really so certain about this knowledge. And final paragraph that I'll look at in this section. So what has been said helps to explain why the term warranted assertion is preferred to the terms belief and knowledge. It is free from the ambiguity of these latter terms, and it involves reference to inquiry as that, as that which warrants assertion. So what makes it possible for us to make an assertion, to say that this is the case? When knowledge is taken as a general abstract term related to inquiry in the abstract, it means warranted assertability, just kind of the abstract idea of this. The use of a term that designates a potentiality rather than an actuality involves recognition that all special conclusions of special inquiries are parts of an enterprise that is continually renewed or is a going concern. So the possibility or the potentiality, I guess, of warranted assertability just draws us to the, points us to the fact that inquiry is something always ongoing. We're looking for something that is warrantedly assertable, right? Something that we can be justified in asserting for the sake of future inquiries as holding as a relatively stable basis for conducting future inquiries. But of course, that doesn't mean we won't have to revise that knowledge, that assertion later. All right. So I'll stop here and then continue on in the next video.